As the Allied forces, the United States, Great Britain, and France, prepared to assault Fortress Europa, or the Atlantic Wall, Adolf Hitler's fortification of the coastline of northern France on June 6, 1944, there were many different things to consider. Reconnaissance and counterintelligence were key components of the planning. The logical spot for an amphibious invasion, a military technique using naval vessels and infantry simultaneously, was the harbor in Pas-de-Calais, a major ferry and shipping port in northeastern France. As such, Hitler had commanded his generals to heavily fortify this location with anti-personnel devices, heavy guns, and anti-aircraft weaponry. These obstacles made up the aforementioned Atlantic Wall, or Fortress Europa, and they presented serious challenges to individuals involved in the invasion. Here are some examples of anti-personnel obstacles and artillery weapons used in the Battle of Normandy. In this picture of the beachhead at Normandy, you can see evidence of German preparation for the invasion. The beachheads at Omaha and Utah had obstacles to restrict the landing of amphibious vehicles. These included Erwin Rommel's asparagus, Belgian gates, and hedgehogs. Rommel's asparagus, which were logs sunk into the sand along the beach, served a dual purpose. They could disrupt paratrooper landings or jab holes in the bottom of the Duck W amphibious landing vehicles used by the Navy and Merchant Marine to land infantry on the beachhead. Belgian gates and hedgehogs were both anti-tank obstacles and provided significant impediment to armor coming onto the beach. Sunk into the cliffs along the beachhead were machine gun nests or pillboxes, hidden in the cliffs as concrete bunkers with grass or vegetation growing on top to disguise their purpose from aerial bombers or surveillance. In this picture, you can see the last remaining German battery from World War II at Longues-sur-Mer, in French, meaning along the sea. The guns at Longues-sur-Mer are inert, but their specifications are frightening. These 150mm cannons had a firing range of 12 miles or 15 kilometers. Their overlapping fields of fire would be challenging to Allied naval vessels as they approached France. The Allied command, under the control of Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower and British General Bernard Montgomery, decided to plan the invasion in a location that Hitler's forces would not expect: Normandy. Normandy, a province of northern France, had large beaches backed by tall, rocky cliffs. It was dotted with small towns and medieval fortresses. Normandy was a mostly agricultural community, very small. Hitler's forces had minimally fortified the area with bunkers, command towers, heavy artillery, anti-aircraft guns, and anti-personnel devices. But because it was so remote and so rural, they had not devoted as much time or resources to this area. Normandy was not a natural harbor, and therefore not a logical place to plan an amphibious invasion. Eisenhower and Montgomery took advantage of this. Attacking where Nazi forces would be most unprepared was the best possible option for a successful invasion. Montgomery believed that an amphibious invasion at Normandy could coordinate the transportation of large barges called mulberries, along with other equipment and ships and men and manpower that were moving towards Normandy Beach. These barges would be sunk at the beachheads, creating a man-made harbor with mooring posts for logistical purposes. Once the location for the invasion was selected, the real planning began. The Allied forces began preparing for a two-pronged invasion. Allied paratroopers would drop in behind enemy lines, while an amphibious infantry landing occurred almost simultaneously, technically 6 hours later. Normandy was divided into 5 beachheads: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, each with a certain force, either American, British, or Canadian, charged with heading operations in that area. As troops shipped out from the United States and began to train in England for the eventual invasion. A new counterintelligence division was crafted to provide disinformation to the Germans in an attempt to keep the Normandy invasion plan a secret. This division, the 23rd Headquarters Specialty Group, or the Ghost Army, this picture, depicting their unit insignia, was charged with creating realistic, but fake, Allied training camps along the coastline of England. 1,100 personnel using inflatable tanks, artillery, armored cars, and planes convinced German reconnaissance and spy planes that their bases were fully populated. They were even more effective in their deception by combining real pieces of artillery, tanks, and armored vehicles into their repertoire. These massive fake bases gave aerial surveyors the idea that the Allies were planning on going ahead with a Calais invasion, not invading at Normandy. The unit even used speakers to give the impression of tanks moving, engines roaring, and troops maneuvering. Their audio was amplified with special speakers and could be heard as far as 15 miles away. Because these men needed a special skill set for creativity, they weren't your typical GIs. They were recruited from art schools. They were Hollywood set designers and actors, engineers, and special effects artists. They were as authentic as possible. Their audio was recorded from troop training exercises. They even painted authentic division insignia on their armored vehicles and created false radio traffic, radio personalities, and individual Morse code operators for the Germans to spy on. The Ghost Army was so successful in its misinformation campaign. Although one of Hitler's generals, General Erwin Rommel, did not believe that the invasion would be at Calais, he thought it would be at Normandy, the misinformation from the Ghost Army was enough to convince most German commanders and Hitler that the invasion would come at Pas de Calais. After the successful Normandy invasion, the Ghost Army continued its counterintelligence operations on mainland Europe. They were so successful that a group of inflatable Sherman tank operators actually scared about 30 German soldiers into surrendering to a fake tank. Overall, the Ghost Army was successful in its mission. They deceived the Germans and convinced them to ignore the signs of the impending Normandy invasion. They also convinced the Germans that the Allied army was larger than it actually was. This rarely discussed movement is one of the amazing stories of ingenuity and bravery from World War II that led to mission success.